All right, so what I want to talk about today is some activation drills. The point of getting activated before we run or bike is to connect our body together. So we want to connect our core to our hips, to our feet. That's going to give us maximum power output on the bike. It's going to give us the best response when we're running. So the idea here is we want good core engagement. And what we want to think about is if I were to sandwich my abdomen, so I'm pushing on my back and on my front here, I want to resist this. So I'm pushing out with my abdomen. I'm not shrinking. The same thing, if I'm going to push inward with my abdomen here, I'm resisting that pressure that I'm creating. That's core engagement. I should be filling my abdomen with pressure rather than shrinking and getting small. So what we want to do is think about feet. I want a nice high arch. What's going to happen is as I take my feet, if I let them collapse in, you'll see my knees come together. We want to resist that. That's wasted energy. It's going to create problems in your hips and knees. We want to take the feet and raise the arch up. That's going to drive our knees out, open our hips up into a neutral position so that we get good hip flexion and extension. As I'm running like that with my foot contacting the ground and having a nice high arch, it allows me to come nice and neutral through my hip joint. Same idea on the bike. As I press down on the pedals, when my foot has a nice arch in it, it's going to allow that hip to function really well. Let those glutes pull that pedal down and allow my core to be engaged so that I don't get hip flexor impingement. So what we want to do for the activation is super simple. Mini band is my favorite go-to. I can do this without the mini band, but it just helps give me a little resistance. So I'm going to put this right below my knees. You could do it above your knees. My preference is just below for comfort. I'm going to get my feet about hip width apart. And all I'm going to do is some nice easy squats. I'm going to press into my abdomen so that I can feel that pressure pushing out as I squat down. Don't have to go super low. What you'll notice is if you go too low and you're pressing into your abdomen, you'll start to fold and lose that core engagement. So we don't want to go so low that we lose core engagement. We're just coming down, keeping the core engaged, and coming back up. So what I'm feeling as I'm doing this is I'm pushing my knees out. I can feel the arches of my feet raising, and I can feel the load in my glutes. Common error with this squat is to come so far forward that all the load is in my quads. This is really ineffective. So what we want to do is core, hips come back first as I sink down. Hips come back as I sink down. My perception is all on my hips. I don't want to be thinking about head or shoulders. What will happen is if you put your perception on what your head or your shoulders are doing, you tend to fold forward and your head will go down. So I'm thinking here. So that's the first activation. 10, 15 of these is plenty. The next one I'm going to do is a hip hinge. Same thing with the mini band. So now all I'm thinking is I'm going to take my hips, I'm going to push them back behind me, I'm going to keep my shins nice and vertical. On that squat, I was allowing my shins to come forward. For this is going to be very running centric. Core engaged, hips are going to come back and come forward. Same idea, still bringing those arches up, bringing the hips back and forward, keeping my shins nice and vertical. 10 or 15 of those is plenty. The next one I like to do is I'm going to ditch the mini band here. We're going to get on one leg. Same idea that we're just doing with that hinge, except now I'm doing it on one leg. Just going to hinge forward and come back. And so as I'm engaging through that core, I can feel that knee stay nice and outside. I'm not driving the knee in, it's coming out. So as that arch stays nice and high and active, my knee stays to the outside, keeps my hip in neutral as I hinge forward. One more thing that I'm paying attention to as I'm doing this is I'm not allowing my hips to rotate. So as I come forward, I'm keeping the hips parallel with each other. Once I've done 10 or 15 of those, I'll switch legs. And then the very last drill that I like to do prior to running or biking is what we call a hip airplane. So, same idea of what I just did, except this time as I get to the bottom of my hinge, I'm actually going to open the hip up and then close it all the way down and come back to neutral and up. What will happen is most of us will be okay on this opening phase, and then we'll close it, but like twist. And what we want to do is keep that core engaged, so as we close this hip down or bring the hips together, I'm still active here. And then I really want to come back to neutral. I want to find this neutral position at the end before I come up. That's going to teach you where the hips should be when we're on the bike or running, so we don't get this sort of thing happening as we're running or on the bike. We want to keep that core engaged this whole time. The idea of all these drills is to feel how your body is reacting. If I do this and I'm going to go for a run and I notice that I'm super wobbly, like it's very hard to hold balance, I'm going to fall over, I'm not going to run hard that day. These drills are going to tell me this is the day I can go hard, or this is the day I need to back off because my legs just aren't there for me. You can keep going through these to try and get that balance better. But in general, this is a good test of our neurologic system to see if we're ready to run hard today, we're ready to bike hard today. And if we're not, we just really need to take that in consideration with whatever we do next.